Okay, assalamu alaikum. Hope you are well. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Hope you are all doing okay. I don't know why, but I have this really annoying buzz coming through my my headphones, and I don't know what it is, metallic buzzing. I'm not sure if you guys can hear it. I can. Anyway, let's get on with this. So, assalamu alaikum to everybody who's with me. Salam Tho 607. Hi man, assalamu alaikum. Always good to have you. And that's all I have in the chat. Okay. So this is going to be a brief share, a brief contemplation that I'm going to share. It's not going to be long at all. And sad as it is, I didn't even have to, I didn't have any image or anything prepared yesterday when I thought of, when I decided to do this topic. And I pretty much knew that, all I had to do was go online, and on that same day I'd find some piece of news, some picture that I could use for this. And it's just depressing, the whole situation in Gaza and other places in the world, especially in the world. I think of Gaza a lot more just because I see in many ways that if the world doesn't stop this, it won't stop anything else that's happening in the world, right? So there's a lot of atrocities happening now, and there's in Sudan, there's in Congo, there's in all these other places. But the clearest thing is here. I mean, in other places, it's a lot of civil war and civil struggle. The same people, same ethnicity, fighting against each other. But in Gaza, it's been, in Palestine, at large, it's been, the longest ongoing occupation and, oppression. And the whole world has its eyes on it, and it's been declared a genocide. It's gone to the International Court of Justice. All of this has happened, and still it's continuing. If the world isn't stopping this, well, it's not going to start. It's not going to care about Sudan, for example. It's not going to care about Myanmar. It's not going to care about Congo. Anyway. So what I wanted to talk about is just share something, a quick insight I saw in the Qur'an about the whole issue of human shields. So like I said, when I did the image, it's known right now. It's known that Israel is, of course, the one which systematically uses human shields, right? I could have put up that famous image of an Israeli tank or Israeli armored vehicle rolling through the street with a Palestinian boy strapped on the front in order to stop, in order to basically act like a human shield to stop Hamas from blowing up that tank or that armored vehicle. Or the image of soldiers walking down the street with a little Palestinian boy, held in front of them, right? Norman Finkelstein has talked a lot about how it's been it's totally documented that Israel is the one which uses human shields, and the Palestinians, Hamas, do not use human shields at all, right? So this here is a brief article from that. Israel's use of human shield in Gaza was systematic, soldiers and former detainees tell the AP. And just today, like I said, I didn't have to prepare anything for look hard for an image. I knew that I could find one fresh. This is just something which happened, I think, today. This pediatrician, Dr. Ala al-Najab, right? Her 9 kids were killed. So she's a pediatrician at Al-Tahrir Clinic in Al-Nasr Medical Complex in southern Gaza, and was on duty when an Israeli airstrike hit her home, killing 9 of her 10 children, right? So her husband had returned home from dropping her at work when Israeli decided to bomb their home. Her husband is still in the ICU. And they have this thing called a program called Daddy's Home. So they follow somebody who they, of course, is who believes that they consider this person, that person to be Hamas, but they'll follow a Palestinian home, right, and wait till he gets home while he's with his family before bombing them, right. And now it's become, it's being said openly now that that the enemies of Israel are the children, that we have to kill all the children. That's it's a long ago rhetoric where where when they destroyed the Shifa hospital and they blamed it on a misfired rocket from Hamas. That's so old news now. I mean, it's so far beyond that, right? They've destroyed every single hospital in Gaza. So these were her kids, right? Put them in the thumbnail, and this image of her, holding them for the last time before they were said to be buried, right? So what about this idea? Is there anything that any guidance sort of we can take from the Quran when it comes to this idea of human shields? Of course, in the past, warfare was never done in this depraved way, right? Nobody would think to hide behind civilians anyway, right? But the closest thing that I found to it is this verse. So the other day when I was reading this, I thought this is sort of like the idea of human shields, right? And how if there were human shields, if you were to if the enemy was hiding behind human shields, the Quran here is preventing attacking, which is of course obvious, right? It's obvious. So this is a verse from Surah Al-Fath, which talks about when the Muslims came to Mecca to fulfill the Hajj, the pilgrimage, and it was the Umrah really, the lower, not the full Hajj, the Umrah, and the Meccans prevented them, and actually there was a little bit of fighting, which we don't find in the Seerah literature, but the Quran does confirm in a different verse, and that there was some amount of fighting. Right, it says. But in this verse it says هم الذين كفروا وصدوكم عن المسجد الحرام والهدي معكوفا أن يبلغ محله. They are the ones who kafaru and obstructed you from the Masjid al-Haram while the offering was prevented from reaching its place of sacrifice. And then this is the key part. وَلَوْلَا رِجَالٌ مُؤْمِنُونَ وَنِسَاءٌ مُؤْمِنَاتٌ. And if it had not been for believing men and believing women whom you did not know, لَمْ تَعْلَمُوهُمْ أَنْ تَطَؤُوهُمْ, that you might trample them, you might harm them. Right, it says here kill, but the word used in Arabic is literally to tread on them. That you might tread on them by mistake, you might harm them by mistake. أَنْ تَطَؤُوهُمْ فَتُصِيبَكُمْ مِنْهُمْ مَعَرَّةٌ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Right, then there would be befall you because of that, because of doing that to them, some dishonor, right, without you knowing, without you even knowing, right. So you would have trampled upon these people that you would not even know about, right. لِيُدْخِلَ اللَّهُ فِي رَحْمَتِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ, so that God may cause to enter in His mercy whomever He wills, right. And then it says at the end, لَوْ تَزَيَّلُوا لَعَذَّبْنَا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْهُمْ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا. Right? If they had been apart, if these believing men and believing women were mixed in with the people of Mecca, or the kuffar of Mecca, if they had been separate, then there would have become a punishment upon the people of Mecca. In this case, of course, what's meant by that, then they would have been allowed to attack. The Muslims would have been allowed to attack them, right? Because of course they did fight them first, right? So this is an example of that, right? So that if there is such a thing as human shield, right, you are still not allowed to attack. You're still not allowed to attack and harm the innocents, the human shields within them, right? You have to wait for them to be separate. You have to let them be separate before you are allowed to attack, right? So this was this verse just popped into my mind when I was thinking about the whole issue, right? Does the Quran have any actual, something to say about this issue of human shields and hiding behind others or non-combatants, right? And this is the closest thing. Okay, it's not a one-to-one exact idea, right? And it's nowhere near like what the Israelis are doing, where they literally are taking Palestinians and using them as literal human shields, walking down the streets with them, right? Or strapping them onto their tanks or armored vehicles. So the mu'minun, unknown to the Prophet's army among the Meccans, actually functioned as human shields for the kuffar here. Had it not been for them and the possibility of harming them by mistake, then the army would have been allowed to enter Mecca by force, right? In order to complete the Umrah, right? They would have had more freedom in that. But of course, we know that they were prevented even from the other verses in the same surah. God prevented the believers, هو الذي كف أيديكم عنهم وأيديهم عنكم. He's the one who prevented their hands from you and your hands from them, right? And that's shown as a mercy, right? That there was no fighting that was continued, right? And one of the reasons for that is because they could have harmed others in there who were innocent. You can also extend this a little bit by looking at the punishments that were visited on past peoples, right? Continuously in the Quran, this punishment comes after the believers were saved, right? They were فَلَمَّا نَجَّيْنَا, and when our commandment came, when our commandment came, in this case, we saved Hud and those who believed with him. So God took them out before visiting a punishment upon them, right? And that's the sort of thing that if Israel was really serious, right, that's what it would do, right? It would try to take in those whom it considers to be innocent and civilians, right? Get them out of harm's way, at least those whom it's sure 100% are innocent, right? But of course, for them, it's not about that. It's just about ethnic cleansing. It's about genocide. It's about taking the land, right? It's abundantly clear now, right? But again, so these verses, and there are many like them. They speak a little bit to that as well, right? وَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا نَجَّيْنَا هُودًا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ بِرَحْمَةٍ مِنَّا وَنَجَّيْنَاهُمْ مِنْ عَذَابٍ غَلِيظٍ. And when our commandment came, we saved Hud and those who believed with him by mercy from us, and we saved them from a harsh punishment. And again here, فَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا نَجَّيْنَا صَالِحًا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ. And when our command came, we saved Salih and those who believed with him by mercy from us, and we saved them from the disgrace of that day. إِنَّ رَبَّكَ هُوَ الْقَوِيُّ الْعَزِيزُ. And it says, وَأَخَذَ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا الصَّيْحَةُ فَأَصْبَحُوا فِي دِيَارِهِمْ جَاثِمِينَ. And the sayha, the punishment, came only upon those who had wronged themselves, right? The others were allowed to be saved. They were taken away. Here's another one. لَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا نَجَّيْنَا شُعَيْبًا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ. And when our command came, we saved Shu'aib and those who believed with him by mercy from us. And the shriek seized those who had wronged, and they became within their homes like corpses fallen prone. Another verse. وَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا نَجَّيْنَا شُعَيْبًا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ بِرَحْمَةٍ مِنَّا وَأَخَذَتِ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا الصَّيْحَةُ فَأَصْبَحُوا فِي دِيَارِهِمْ جَاثِمِينَ. Is this the same one as before? Did I repeat it? Yeah, I repeated it. Sorry. I just added the second verse here. كَانْ لَمْ يَغْنَوْا فِيهَا أَلَا بُعْدًا لِمَدْيَنَ كَمَا بُعِدَتْ Thamud. I think I added this next verse here because, sort of reminiscent a bit like what Gaza is now, right? And the shriek seized them, it seized those who had wronged themselves, right? And it became as if they had never prospered therein, right? So completely desolate, right? The way much of Gaza is now, just completely desolate, and not a single building standing in huge swaths, right? Here's another one. فَلَمَّا نَسُوا مَا ذُكِّرُوا بِهِ أَنْجَيْنَا الَّذِينَ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ السُّوءِ وَأَخَذْنَا الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا بِعَذَابٍ بَئِسٍ بِمَا كَانُوا يَفْسُقُونَ. And when they, those advised, forgot that by which they had been reminded, we saved those who had forbidden evil and seized those who wronged, right? So it's separating those who had actually spoken out against the evil, right? Who had forbidden evil. They were saved, right? And the punishment came upon the rest of them, right? ثم صدقناهم الوعد فأنجيناهم ومن نشاء وأهلكنا المسرفين. Another example. We fulfilled for them, the messengers, the promise, and we saved them and whom we willed and destroyed the transgressors. So again, so this is of course throughout the Quran, right? That God saves those who are faithful before visiting the punishment on the rest of the people, right? The punishment is held off from the people until the innocent are separated out. Until the innocent are separated out. Okay, another way of seeing that, the innocents who are there do act like shields against the punishment of Allah, right? So the punishment of Allah is not visited upon them until the innocents are taken away, until there are no more innocent people who are like human shields. Okay. There's another one. رَبِّ نَجِّنِي وَأَهْلِي مِمَّا يَعْمَلُونَ فَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَأَهْلَهُ أَجْمَعِينَ. He said, my Lord, save me and my family the consequences of what they do. So we saved him and his family, all except an old woman among those who remained behind. And then we destroyed the others, and we rained upon them a rain of stones, and evil was the rain of those who were warned. Right? So this was a bit reminiscent of falling bombs. Right? Look at the bombs falling on Gaza now. But it was in this verse saying we rained upon them a rain of stones, and evil was the rain of those who were warned. Right? They were warned. Right? They warned and they did not stay away. Now the Israelis were raining down bombs on the refugee camps that they want people to go to, right? So they say in the safe zones, right? None of the safe zones were safe. The safe zones were probably the worst places to be. That's where they ended up targeting. It was absolutely crazy. إن في ذلك لا the Arabic is not showing it. إن في ذلك لآية وما كان أكثرهم مؤمنين. Truly, this is a sign, but most of them were not people of faith. All right, so that's basically all I wanted to share. Mainly this verse, I think it speaks to it best. And that's it. Don't really have more to say on this. Like I said, it was going to be a brief contemplation to share. So we'll leave it there. And if anybody wants to come on, please feel free to do so. The link is in the description. Remember, everybody's free to come on and share any contemplations, any ideas they have, anything which struck them from the Quran, any insights that they've had. You're more than welcome to come on and share them. If I recall correctly, Hassan al-Maliki said that one of the reasons for the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah was civilian protection. Yeah, in many ways there was, right? So the thing about the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah, it really was a fatah, like the Quran calls it a fatah, like an opening. It really was an opening, because if you look in the take of course the history as best you can, you see that during the time, like when at Hudaybiyyah, the Prophet had with him around 1,400 to 1,700 people, right? After the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah, it was only 2 years later the Prophet entered Mecca with over 10,000, right? There was an exponential growth in the number of people who entered the Deen, who became, who joined the Prophet during the peacetime of Hudaybiyyah, right? Before that, no, it was very little. Right, the numbers of the believers, there were few, right? In Mecca there was very few, right? And then they came to Medina, and of course, slowly, more and more people converted in Medina and became Muslim, right? But even in Medina, it took a while for a lot of people. It wasn't that the whole of Medina quickly came behind the Prophet, right? So it really was an opening, because it allows, having that peacetime allows the truth to shine more, right? Allows the truth to shine more, which is why, the peace treaty, it's what in the Quran it's called the Fath. The conquest is actually a peace treaty. It's not another like military conquest. And of course, the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah was lopsided in favor of the mushrikeen in a way, right? If you talk about having fairness, but in another way, it wasn't, because the issues which where it wasn't even, you wouldn't want it to be even. The Prophet wouldn't have wanted it that way. So the issue, for example, of the Meccans said that if somebody leaves Mecca and joins the Prophet would had to return that person, right? Whereas if somebody left the Muslims and joined the Meccans would not have needed to return him. So the second request there, the Prophet would not want to return forcibly somebody who left, right? Complete freedom of religion, which again shows you, the verse which says, قاتلوهم حتى لا تكون فتنة ويكون الدين لله, to fight them until there is no more persecution and deen is for Allah. I mean, deen is supposed to be for Allah, I mean, without any compulsion, because the deen for Allah means no compulsion in religion, right? So the Meccan Muslims leaving Medina and going to Mecca, the Prophet would not have wanted the Meccans to force them back, right? So that side of the treaty was acceptable to the Prophet, and it would have been better if the other side had the same idea. But of course, they didn't. They had this coercion of deen, right? If somebody were to leave the Meccans to join the Muslims, the Prophet would have had to return them back, right? Return them back forcibly. So that was part of the treaty. That was part of the treaty which a lot of the Muslims despised a lot, right? But the Prophet accepted it for the greater good, right? He said he would accept anything which would honor the precepts of Allah. And of course, them being, Muslims being taken back to Mecca wouldn't have meant that they would, necessarily lose their faith or become apostates or anything like that. You can't force religion. You just can't. So there's that. Other verses about protection of individuals and the criminal groups would be in the beginning of Surah At-Tawbah. Yeah, that's right. So in Surah At-Tawbah in the beginning, there's also verses along those lines too. Nico, your thoughts on the Palestine make reels on Instagram and saying, Ya Rab, ignore whoever ignores this reel. I will not forgive anyone who skips this reel. Yeah, I mean, ignore those sort of things myself, to be honest. I mean, there's no point. I mean, somebody who does that kind of stuff is I would say is just somebody maybe not even a genuine person, right? I mean, your brother or cousin Muhammad said in a video that the condition of the Palestinian remains the same because they don't change themselves. What are your thoughts? Do they have some flaws? So no, I mean, I spoke about this. I did a live stream called, I think it was called Quranic gaslighting, right? Someone which has a thumbnail of, a Palestinian flag, somebody waving a Palestinian flag. So no, I mean, I don't agree with this at all, right? Absolutely not. This idea that the oppressed are oppressed because it's their fault, that is completely a narrative pushed by the tyrants from the earliest times, right? It was said of Hussein, right, in his uprising against the tyrants. It was said of all of the people who are oppressed by tyrants. They say that it's God's will that you are oppressed. It's your fault. There's a problem in you, right? If you were better, you would not have us as you know, you would not have us, the tyrants, as your rulers, right? So it's really your fault, not our fault, right? It's diabolical. It's diabolical. So it's definitely not. No, I don't know who you mean by your brother or cousin Muhammad. I'm not sure who you're talking about here. I don't know who you're talking about there, but no, it's just not. It's not because there's a fault in them or anything like that. Sorry. This is an injustice. Justice that's been done to them, right? If anything, the fault is in the rest of the people for not helping them, right? What is the verse? وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن كَعَذَابِ اللَّهِ. So it says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ آمَنَّا. This is a verse in Surah 10, 29. So it's Surah verse 29. 29 is Surah Al-Ankabut, I think, or Al-Qasas. ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله فإذا أوذي في الله جعل فتنة الناس كعذاب الله. Right? And from mankind are those who, when they are, who say they have faith in God, but when they are harmed in the cause of God, they make out the persecution of people as if it were a punishment from God. Right? This is persecution from people. It's not a punishment from God. Right? It's not a punishment from God. Right? That sort of attitude, I think, is completely wrong. It's completely wrong. It's from who? Muhammad, from God. Yeah, no, I don't agree with this at all. Right? You don't blame the oppressed people and say that the fault is theirs. Right? The fault is theirs. And until the messengers were oppressed. Right? Right? Messengers were oppressed, and they were persecuted to an extent until the messenger himself shouts, "Mata Nasrullah," when will the help of Allah come? Right? So that has happened in the past as well, right? So many messengers have been persecuted to the brink. Many were killed, right? You don't put this on the victims, right? So this is like a type of victim blaming, right? No, absolutely not. The issue, and it also, to be honest, it shows ignorance of the situation. I mean, no matter what the Zionists, they just wanted the land. It had nothing to do about them. They were excellent neighbors. I mean, just the other day I was listening to this clip that I came across. I think it was on Twitter or something, where just somebody was being interviewed, an Israeli. This was in Tel Aviv. An Israeli was being interviewed, and he was being asked about the situation before Zionists. Said, before Zionists and Palestinians, they were excellent neighbors. They were brilliant brothers. And the interviewer said, "How do you know this?" Well, this is what my parents, my grandparents tell me, that there was no issue between us. The problem is Zionism. Right? The problem came, and it was Zionism, right? That's what created a rift between us. But we had no issues. They were great. We used to look after each other's children. We were excellent neighbors. It was good times. But in the end, Zionism is what came between us, because we believe that this land belongs to us, right? And so we have to take it out from them. So this idea that it's their fault. What fault? It doesn't matter what they did, right? Even if the Palestinians had been absolutely perfect, exemplary, had done nothing wrong, right? These guys would have still wanted to do this. And the amazing thing about it is that they did it right after, or even before, their own Holocaust. I'm having a lot of doubts over now in Germany, right? So it's wild that the same people who escaped the Holocaust in Germany Just a few years later, the Nakba happened in 1948. World War II ended in 1945. 3 years later, they were there ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. Okay? So is that because, are we going to say that the Palestinians they were at fault and deserved in some way? And what does that mean, that the Jewish people they gained God's favor? They have God's favor, because that's what it comes down to, right? This is exactly the mentality of the tyrants, right? We are winning, and we are persecuting, we are destroying, and we are doing all of this because God is on our side. God is on the side of the persecutors, the oppressors? No, right? Absolutely not, right? Because that's the other side of it. When you say that it's the persecuted, it's their fault, right? It's their fault. Otherwise, God would help them. What we say? Well, God is not helping them. Why? Against who? He's not helping them against these oppressors. Well, then it's like you're saying that the oppressors, God is helping them, right? God is on their side. So definitely avoid any of that kind of thinking. Is just completely out of place. Does it encourage migration instead of? Well, it does. It does. But which suffering, right? It encourages migration instead of being tempted into sin, right? So yes, instead of suffering, in terms of being having that suffering push you into despair, into into basically being unjust to yourself. That's the word in the verse uses, right? الذين تتوفاهم الملائكة ظالمي أنفسهم, those whom the angels cause to die while they are unjust to themselves, right? By committing sins and bad deeds and injustices, right? They are asked, فيما كنتم, well, what was your state? And they say, we were oppressed in the land. And so the angels say, was not God's land vast enough that you should emigrate in it, right? So becoming somebody who's unjust, committing evil and these sort of things due to your oppression is not acceptable, right? If you have a way to emigrate, right? If you have a way to get out, but do they even want them to immigrate? The Israelis, I think they just want to exterminate, right? They say they want other people to absorb them, to take them, right? And that's in the end you must remember that is a persecution in the Quran to take people out of their homes. I remember one time, what's his name, Muhammad Hijab, he had like some proposition for like ex-Muslims and ex-Muslims living in apostates, basically apostates living in Muslim countries. He had this, I have this brilliant solution, right? That they should be allowed to emigrate to other countries, right? Instead of being killed, right, for apostasy, right? They should be allowed. It's just ridiculous. You're now basically promoting something which the Quran considers to be a huge injustice. So either you stay in your Muslim country, you ex-Muslim, either stay there in the place that where you've grown up, where your job is, where your family is. Either you stay there and be killed, or leave. So you're basically forcing them to leave, right? You're forcing them to leave, right? And that's it's mentioned throughout the Quran. Those who are expelled from their homes without any right, right? It's an oppression, and you put it forward as a solution, as a solution to another oppression. Huh? No. Well, they are the embodiment of shaitan. It's absolutely crazy what's happening now. Yeah, and the Hindu Vata are it's a very strange relationship, right? Very strange relationship between the Hindus and the Israelis. Hindus love them and you know and speak so well of them, and the others are like, keep your filthy flag away from ours, right? Because they, of course, the Jews see them as cow worshippers and polytheists, the lowest of the worst of the worst, right? In terms of religiously. I don't think there's any such thing as Hindu Vata. 200 million people of Muslim society live with houses, businesses, schools, etc. Yeah, I mean, I should say I don't know much about that subject myself, but that's what seems to be understood. Oppression of Palestinians brings two narratives in the Muslim world. We are oppressed because we are upon the truth, and it's our fault, given the corrupt aspects of tradition and dominance. Yeah, both of these are not um, both of these are not excuses for anybody persecuting you, right? But of course, no, they're not being persecuted because we're on the truth. And yes, you're right. Both of these narratives are just not correct. 447. Have you put that there? I wonder. 497 was it? Which verse is that? إن الذين تتوفاهم الملائكة. Yeah, that's the verse exactly. Which says, indeed, those whom the angels take in death while wronging themselves, the angels will say, in what condition were you? They will say, we were oppressed in the land. The angels will say, was not the earth of Allah spacious enough for you to emigrate therein? For those therein, their refuge is hell, and evil is a destination. Okay, so we're talking about here people who are engaged in deeds that will lead them to hell, right? And they say they are doing it because they are oppressed in the land, right? They are oppressed in the land. So maybe, I don't know what they do, steal or, racketeering or, engaged in criminal activity. And they say they do it because, we can't get ahead any other way. That sort of attitude. Yeah, that's the verse exactly. It's silly to say Palestinians in Gaza need to fix the Aqidah. Yeah, well, they always say that. They think everything's Aqidah, right? Everything's about the Aqidah. The Aqidah was right, everything else goes correct. That's how they, so the hook they try to get everybody with. They say that they're being punished by God for their bid'ah. In other words, the Ghazan need to become more like Saudi's Khalijis. Yeah, really. It's ironic because in the end, of course, the Palestinians are mostly Sunnis, right? And they think the biggest bid'ah right now, because of the tensions of Iran, they think it's Iran, right? So shouldn't this be happening to Iran rather than the Palestinians? It's all just, and again, it's just forms of gaslighting that everybody uses for their own agenda, for their own sectarian understanding. No, you have to understand that blaming the victims of persecution or oppression, that's just not going to go well, right? That it doesn't happen that way, right? Why isn't it? Why do you think they're basically bought by the West, aren't they? They're bought by the West. What do you say about what? Yeah, about this? Yeah, like I said, it's just. It's just I don't have any patience for that kind of rhetoric, especially not this late at night right now after a long day. Yeah, exactly. They're friends of America and Israel. They want to do this whole normalization. They won't even expel the ambassadors, right? They haven't even expelled the ambassadors. The European countries have expelled the Israeli ambassadors, but the Khaliji states still have not done that. I think they should emigrate to multi-million-dollar societies, which UAE has built, Iman, etc. There are so many vacant houses which can be given as refugees. Yeah, I mean, definitely there's there's a whole verse of those who, one of the reasons why you're permitted to fight. Of course, the other reason is in defense, right? قاتلوا في سبيل الله الذين يقاتلونكم ولا تعتدوا. Fight in the cause of Allah, those who fight you, and do not aggress, do not be the aggressors. God does not love the aggressors. He does not love the starters of war. But the other reason given in the Quran is to help those who are to take out those who are oppressed, right? To get them out from a place where they are, right? So the verse is وما لكم لا تقاتلون في سبيل الله والولدان. Let me get it out. وما لكم. It's in Surah An-Nisa, verse 75, right? So it says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما لكم لا تقاتلون في سبيل الله المستضعفين من الرجال والنساء والولدان الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالم أهلها واجعل لنا من لدنك وليا واجعل لنا من لدنك نصيرا. And what is the matter with you that you fight not in the cause of Allah, while they are oppressed among men, women, and children? And it's good that, it's good, of course it is. The men are mentioned here because one of the worst things that's going on right now is it's always been focused on the women and children. And I don't like it because it's implicitly almost saying that all the men are guilty and they're allowed to be killed, right? When this many killed, this many women and children killed, this many women. Well, what about the men? Why are you speaking as if they're guilty and should be killed? So anyway, the verse says, of men, women, and children who say, "Oh, our Lord, Rabbana, akhrijna, take us out of this city of oppressive people, and appoint for us from yourself a protector, and appoint for us from yourself a helper." Right? So that's another way in which, another reason why you can fight in the cause of Allah. I mean, the next verse says, الذين آمنوا يقاتلون في سبيل الله والذين كفروا يقاتلون في سبيل الطاغوت. Right? Those who have faith fight in the cause of Allah, and those who are كفروا fight in the cause of الطاغوت. Right? فقاتلوا أولياء الشيطان. So fight the allies of shaitan, the allies of Satan. إن كيد الشيطان كان ضعيفا. The plot of shaitan is weak. So that's another thing. I mean, but do they want to leave? I mean, there are many Gazans now, and in person they say, like, no, we will not leave our home, right? We're not there. They're not praying. Many of them are not praying to be taken out. Like, save us from this place. Get us out, right? So that's one way. That verse speaks about that, right? But in the end, yes, you can fight to alleviate oppression. Right? You can fight to alleviate oppression. And in the end, of course, it's the opposite. Both the Arab countries, I mean, like Jordan and Egypt, they're saying, no, we will not take the Palestinians in, right? Because that would be aiding in ethnic cleansing. And the Palestinians themselves are saying, we will not leave. Okay, they are saying they will not leave. So what are you going to do? Like, force them to go out? No, look, you have to stop the oppressor, right? There's all this going around trying to find solutions, right? Other than the solution of fighting the oppressor. Why? Right? Why? No, it's just lack of will, cowardice, that sort of stuff. Seems like the majority are incompetent of seeing oppression. Why does that happen? We as human beings are weak somehow. Yes, we are, right, in many ways. But I don't think that the incompetent in seeing such obvious oppression as in Gaza. There are some who can't see it, and they're usually blinded by, in the end, racism. Really, what it comes down to, they're blinded by this racism and indoctrination that they've received for decades now, right, against Muslims and Arabs. So some are blind because of that and don't see it, but many do see it and they don't care, right? They don't care. Why I'm pro migration? Mostly because of the Quran verses. Why? It's because historical thing happened when Mongols killed the Arabs. Well, yeah, I mean, I would be pro migration as well, rather that than genocide. But how many actually want to leave, right? And there are many who are saying, no, look, we don't want to leave. And are you going to force those who don't want to leave? You force them to leave? No, they will stay and they will fight, and then you know they'll probably be killed as well if the world doesn't try to stop this genocide. Anyway, we've gone in deep into like politics and stuff now, but that's basically the contemplation I wanted to share. There's nobody backstage, so I think we might as well close it up for now. So just to reiterate it, this verse here in Surah Al-Fath is a good sort of like sort of indication if we were going to talk about anything in terms of attitude towards human shields. If the Quran were to have one, it would be that no, you do not fight at all if there's a possibility of harming human shields, right? That you don't even fight in that case, right? You try to work around it. I mean, I remember that comedian Bill Burr saying, "Hey, you got to work around it, right? They're hiding behind human shields, all right? Well, you got to work around it. You got to find a way around it." Okay, all right. We'll call it a night there. Adriana, assalamu alaikum. Good to see you. So until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.